So good morning to everyone who's joined us from India, and good afternoon to the ones who are joining us from Japan. Welcome to our webinar on the topic India-Japan Regional Dialogue on the Maritime Cooperation on the occasion of World Oceans Day. My name is Nishtha and I lead the Communications and Outreach at the Maritime Research Center. And I'm going to be conducting today's webinar on this auspicious day of World Oceans Day. First of all, happy World Oceans Day to everyone who's joined us. World Oceans Day is not just a symbolic observance, I would say it's a call to action. Covering over 70% of the Earth's surface, the oceans regulate our climate, they sustain our economies, and they also protect the marine biodiversity. And they are quite literally the fulcrum of life on our planet. So today's webinar is being hosted by the Maritime Research Center in collaboration with the Sasakawa Foundation, which is based out of Tokyo in Japan, and NirDhwani Technologies Pvt Limited. And we have with us the experts from India and Japan who have joined us today to explore the key issues related to the maritime cooperation between India and Japan. And we are honored to welcome a distinguished panel of experts who have graciously agreed to participate in this webinar. Today, we'll hear from a slew of experts, including Dr. Imadul Islam from Ocean Policy Research Institute at the Sasakawa Foundation. We also have with us Professor Shankari Sundaraman from the Jawaharlal Nehru University. So without further ado, I would first like to call Ambassador Anup Kumar Mudgal, who is a former Indian diplomat, and he's also a member of the Blue Economy Task Force in India, at Pvt in India. So Anup sir, over to you for your kind remarks.
Thank you so much, Nishtha. In fact, I am today very especially glad to see two of my colleagues. I would call them experts. Dr. Islam, in fact, we have been meeting in various meetings, and we have been discussing about a possible collaboration between MRC and the Ocean Research Institute. I'm sure this beginning, which has now been made, will go a long way, and we would all benefit from that cooperation and value addition. And then Professor Shankari, in fact, again, we have been working on many issues together, especially with regard to Southeast Asia and Indo-Pacific. And I'm sure her contribution, because she looks at these things from a very different perspective, much wider, much deeper, and futuristic. Yes, because we are basically diplomatic professionals. Sometimes we are not able to see beyond a certain point. And that is where, in fact, the academics play a great role in showing the path. Because very often we come across a situation where there is a fork in the path. And we are not sure whether to take the left or the right or stay where we are. And that is where I think a 360-degree consideration by scholars like Dr. Islam and Professor Shankari, they come very handy, in fact. So I'm very glad and also very happy to see Nishtha and Catherine, who are working so hard on preparing a framework for marine spatial planning, which in my view is probably the most important enabler for ocean science. So I will be very brief today because I'll have to rush for another conference, which by mistake I accepted without knowing that I am supposed to be here. I will be listening to the presentations without being kind of present in audio-visual format. First of all, let me also convey greetings to all of you on the World Ocean Day, which we have been now observing for several years. And for me, who has been kind of dealing with oceans in a pretty close format or setting, I think this day means a lot. In fact, I looked at, UNSC's statement on the World Oceans Day, and the phrase which really, really touched my heart was, let's conserve what conserves us. Now, that is a very profound statement, in fact. I have been struggling to find a punchline to make people realize how important the oceans are. And I think the SG's statement gives that punchline. Let's conserve what conserves us. Now, you see, if you look at the oceans, I also have science background, so I can probably feel that with a greater depth. Life, in fact, originated in oceans. Ocean, in a way, is a mother of life on the planet. Yes. And not only that, through the entire evolution of life on the planet, the oceans provided the means to sustain. They provided the enabling circumstances to sustain life on the planet. In fact, since I've been dealing with blue economy for many years now, in blue economy, in fact, we have been dealing with both the tangible and intangible contribution of ocean to the human society and the rest, because sometimes we presume that we are the only ones on the planet, which is not true. Planet is much bigger than human society alone. But the contribution of ocean to all of that is immense. But when we look at, for example, say tangibles, is there any sector where the ocean is not playing a frontal role? Be it the food security, be it energy, transportation, minerals, recreation, you name it. And, there are estimates, which I think is an understatement, which says the value of blue economy is around $23 trillion. I think those who calculate this, they calculate this only from the viewpoint of tangibles. Yes, they calculate how much of fish, how much of food, how much of energy, how much of mineral and all that stuff. But if you really ask me, for me, the intangibles are certainly more critical and more important than the tangibles. There was, in fact, an estimate that by 2030, 35, the ocean sectors or the BE sectors, they will contribute more than their land counterpart in terms of the economic value addition and in terms of job creation. Now, it's a good news. Yes, it's a good news, but comes with a warning. And that warning takes me to the intangibles. Again, look at, we breathe without realizing where that oxygen is coming from. Yes, we take it for granted. 50% of the oxygen in the atmosphere is produced by the oceans. And after the whole debate on global warming, how much emphasis and investment has gone into carbon capture? Yes. We are talking about hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. But 1/3 of the carbon dioxide produced by all activities on the planet are absorbed by the oceans. Ocean is the single largest sink for carbon dioxide. And we are struggling to deal with minor issues. Yes. For example, when I I always mention, I say the biggest sector, or if one of the biggest, if not the biggest, the automobile transport sector. What is its contribution to carbon emission? Less than 10%. And the oceans give you a straight absorption of 1/3. Now, and we simply don't realize it. And biodiversity. As I just mentioned, we think we are the only species on the earth. Very unfortunate, we are looking at things. Yes. Close to 90% of the planetary biodiversity is hosted by the oceans. And then, I'm sure we are all listening to news and we're talking about, oh, the monsoon is about to arrive, monsoon has arrived, monsoon has stopped, monsoon is taking time to come. Where is this monsoon coming from? The water cycle on the planet is ocean's contribution. Yes. And finally, the amount of heat the ocean absorbs. If we are worried about climate change and warming, but somebody is already doing a great job in mitigating that, and this is oceans. Yes. And how many people really know it or realize it? So on the intangibles, we are not even placing, nor we can place a value on that. Because on the intangibles, depend the tangibles and also depend the life itself. Yes. And now when we were dealing with blue economy, you go to any conference on blue economy, there will be an argument that with the land-based resources depleting, let's go to the ocean for additional resources. Yes. Because a body of water occupying 70% of the planet's surface, could we go there and get more resources? Now, my question is, how will the ocean respond when we go there? How will the ocean respond? Ocean will say, yes, I can provide some additional resources, but will you look after my health? Because if I am sick myself, how would I look after you? We have been treating the oceans for ages. We have been polluting oceans. We have been dumping waste. We have been overfishing. We have been even carrying out very underwater. We never paid attention to the ocean health till it really became a red line to cross. Yes, till it became a red line to cross. The ocean health is under severe threat. Threat from pollution, which is mostly generated from land. Ocean doesn't create any pollution of its own. It's all from land. From land, who? The humans. Yes. Who? In fact, I looked at a statement which says humans which occupy just 10% of the land have the guts to destroy 70% of the ocean. But that is an immense statement, in fact, what we have done to the oceans. There is tremendous acidification. There is loss of biodiversity. There is warming. Now, if all these things keep going on, believe me, our capacity to control global warming, all bets will be off. Without the ocean health, we simply manage that threat of global warming, which we term as existential threat. Now, the issue is, Professor Islam mentioned about the conference going on in France. And this is also a decade of ocean sciences. Yes. There will be, I'm sure, talk about all these things. How to relieve ocean from the onslaught of pollution and degradation of biodiversity. Yes. Now, when it comes to the factors which are hurting ocean health, some of the factors are visible to us. We can see them. Yes. We can see them how the ships are polluting. We can see them how the plastic is polluting. We can see how the effluent from the land is polluting. That we can see. But a large chunk of what is impacting the ocean's health, we can't even see that. In fact, I always mention that you have to remember, we see the symptoms on the surface, but the causes are underwater. Now, unless we address the causes underwater, we shall not be able to address the consequences or the symptoms on surface. But UD, underwater domain awareness, is a relatively new term. Why it's new term? Because the immensity of knowledge and technology it needs, we didn't have. Right? We didn't have. How to manage this whole huge space and the mechanisms which were undergoing underwater in terms of the chemistry of water, physics of water, and the biology of water. We didn't have the means to understand that. As a result, we thought, all right, something which we don't understand, we close our eyes. And we closed our eyes. But now with the new technologies available, I think we can dig deep into the water and try to understand what's happening there. Because unless we understand what's happening there, unless we find a way to regulate that, our problem will not be solved. And that is where, in fact, I admire the work being done by MRC. When MRC went underneath the ocean, nobody was doing it, to my knowledge, in India. Yes, especially from that angle, understanding the chemistry, physics, and biology of underwater. We were doing something to understand the security aspect of underwater. But in my view, the biggest security threat would be the ocean health. Right? So today we have those means available to us. I hope more people join you in this campaign of understanding what we can't see. Right? Because that we can see, what we can see is easy to understand. What's great fun in that? You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. But something which you can't see, you can't touch, you can't feel, how would you understand it? That is the huge challenge which you have taken at MRC. Yes. And I'm very happy that, Professor Islam, you have agreed to join hands in that. Because I know this job is immense and cannot be done by one entity or one nation in isolation. It has to be a collaborative, whole of society approach. It will start from schools and go to the cutting edge of technology. You remember in one of the conferences, somebody asked a child, tell me what is the easiest way to control plastic pollution? And the child said, why don't you do it in the first place? don't pollute. That is easy to do, but we don't like to do easy things. We want to do complicated. We create problems, then we take pride in solving them. Yes. But to know whether we are creating a problem, we still have to know the space in which we are operating. An underwater space we didn't know, and therefore we didn't know what kind of serious problems we were creating. But with your contribution and the like-minded, I'm sure we will be in a much better position. Arma, you always talk about digital oceans, modeling and simulation. I was amazed to see a report last week where they have created a digital twin of a nuclear reactor. Yes. Which means they will be able to watch the nuclear reactors functioning 24/7 without taking the risk of getting close to the reactor. Arnab, that is the final objective of what you are doing. We identify the hotspots, and can we create a digital twin of that space in understanding what's happening there? That is my dream, in fact. One day, institutions like MRC would be able to create a virtual digital twin where you would be able to see what's happening underwater, and you would be able to take precautions in time. Yes. So that is what I have to say with my limited knowledge and understanding. But while I'm very sad about what we have done, I'm very confident what we can do to recover. I look at Catherine sitting here. Catherine is working so hard on marine spatial planning. And marine spatial planning would be an immense contribution to conserving the ocean and their health. Now, with these words, I will stop. I once again congratulate all of you, convey my greetings, and say, let's take a pledge. Let's conserve what conserves us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Mudgal, for taking out time from your busy schedule. And of course, like all of us can agree to your remarks on the fact that, large chunk of what's happening, what's impacting our oceans cannot be assessed until and unless we go underwater. So thank you once again for your thought-provoking speech. And it was a great time having you, Ambassador Mudgal. So before moving on to the next presenter, I have a quick reminder.
Please excuse me, I have to rush. I will be listening to the conversation, but I will not be present in audio-visual format. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Slav.
Right. So before we move on to the next presenter, I have a kind request. If in the audience, we can keep our microphones off, since it disrupts the presenter and the speaker who's making the presentation. So now we'll move on to the next speaker. We have Dr. Commander Arnav Das, who is the founder and director of the Maritime Research Center. He is a former naval officer with Indian officer with 2 decades of active service and holds a PhD from IIT Delhi, specializing in underwater acoustics. He has worked on numerous projects and has many publications to his credit. Today, Dr. Das is going to make a presentation on underwater domain awareness. Over to you, sir.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Nishtha, and thank you very much, Ambassador Mudgal, sir, for your very kind opening remarks. And it definitely sets the tone for our entire webinar. And we always continue to look forward to your guidance. So I'll continue with where Mudgal sir left, and the importance of underwater domain awareness has been well elaborated by him. You all know 75% of the Earth is water. And I would also like to put a number of 90% lies below the surface of the water. And when we say 90% lies below the surface of the water, so it's extremely important if we have to manage the oceans or manage the water bodies. I mean, it is not limited to the ocean alone. Even the freshwater systems are so very critical. So we need to make sure that we are able to kind of understand, measure what's going on, and then only we can take it forward. So this underwater domain awareness, for which we also have a copyright, looks at the safe, secure, sustainable growth for all in the new global order. Now, when we say global order, what is the new global order? The entire global community is now strategically looking at the tropical waters. And the uniqueness of the tropical water has to be understood if we have to really go forward. The first and foremost, the rich biodiversity. So there is huge opportunity here to explore and exploit. But the other, and even in terms of the non-living resources, so the deep ocean resources that are there are immense. But the problem here is when we talk about underwater domain awareness, the sonar, which is the only means to see below the water, suffers 60% degradation. The conventional sonars, which were designed during the Cold War period, were designed for the temperate and the polar region. And the same instrument or the technology, when it is deployed in the tropical water, suffers 60% degradation. So this is something we need to really be mindful. Otherwise, many of the countries in the Indo-Pacific, which are the the global south, as we call them, are too heavily dependent on the technologies imported from the West. But if we don't understand these nuances, we'll really go wrong. Now, when we talk about the Indo-Pacific strategic space, the broader definition, I mean, in one way, people say from Hollywood to Bollywood, but the more important definition relevant for today's discussion is that it is the tropical waters of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So if we do not front load the tropical waters or the tropical characteristics, we are really missing out on a huge part of this whole discussion. Now, very important for us to understand that for any strategic perspective, people, economy, nature becomes a very important aspect, which mostly gets forgotten. I mean, the so-called development we talk, the indigenous people or the coastal people or the riverine people are the biggest victim of development. So whose development are we talking about? So the inequality and the lopsided definition of development really puts us in a very, very difficult situation. So when we talk about people, how the coastal communities can be part of this whole development initiative is something we need to look at. We'll elaborate this a little more. So the inclusive governance is a very important part, and livelihood potential. Today, I mean, if you just look at the fisheries sector, 90% people are owning only 10% of the revenue. And the 10% who are engaged in corporate fishing or corporate fisheries are earning 90% of the revenue. So even the policy making gets very, very skewed. Now, the second is the economy. I mean, we have to look at now, we have done enough damage to land. So increasingly, we are looking at the oceans for food security, energy security, and you can keep naming it. So how do we look at it in a manner that it is more efficient and effective? But the most important aspect is nature. How do we make it sustainable? Today, everything is so fragmented. I mean, even sometimes I wonder when we hear about climate change management or, climate change risk assessment, how many times have you heard the word underwater? Without underwater, if 90% of the 75% of the water bodies is below the surface, without a discussion or without inclusion of underwater domain awareness, where are we going even in terms of the climate change management? So, I mean, there are nuances which have to be really understood. Let's go forward. I mean, maritime domain awareness is a term which we have heard a lot now. But the origin actually was the technical committee of the International Maritime Organization. But, it just came out as a term which didn't get much outreach. But after the 9/11 incident in the US and then subsequently 26/11 incident in India and this part of the world, MDA became a very, very critical term used by the strategic community. But my problem there is, although the basic definition of MDA includes the underwater also, I mean, right from space to underwater, it talks about the entire maritime space. But the problem is that it remained a security-driven formulation. That means the other stakeholders like blue economy and others did not get much attention. The second is it only remained on the surface. So underwater somehow did not get addressed at all. So we need to look at it holistically. Now, when we talk about the stakeholder, we include all the four stakeholders: strategic security, blue economy, environment and disaster management, and science and technology. Now, let's just quickly look at what are the issues. Now, security now has become a very important challenge because of the political volatility, inequality, whole lot of disruptive elements, terrorist groups, piracy, whole lot of such security concerns are kind of becoming a very important aspect. But if we do not understand, but what is happening is we are not able to chase the real reason or the real issues, and we continue to suffer. The second is the blue economy. We are increasingly, as I said, we are increasingly looking at the oceans for food security. But if you look at fisheries, since 1996, the fish stock globally is on the decline. But on the other side, you see 80% bycatch. Now, how do you reconcile this? If 80% is getting wasted and on the other side, fish stock is on the decline, don't you think we need to manage it more effectively? So underwater domain awareness becomes a very important ingredient there. But do our regulators even understand what we are talking about? Then we talk about energy security in this part of the world. I mean, Indian Ocean is very important for energy security. So it enhances the level of interference by the extra-regional powers. Deep ocean mission. I mean, the electric vehicle initiative, 6 times more resources are available in the deep ocean. But do we really have sustainable methods for exploration and exploitation? We really need to look at this very, very carefully. Blue economy, even in the riverine systems, I mean, we are talking about inland water transport, we're talking about a whole lot of other issues. But we have very little understanding of, even the technology availability to the larger global south is very, very little. Now, in terms of environment and disaster management, we know that the speed of sound underwater is 5 times almost, to 345 meters per second in air to 59 meters per second below. So the acoustic habitat degradation, I mean, the marine mammals also use acoustics for biologically critical function. But we do not have acoustic habitat degradation as a major component when we are dealing with the oceans or the water bodies in terms of when we talk about environment impact assessment. So even the environment impact assessment that we do is not really being done holistically. And disaster management, I mean, I've been to Japan after the Fukushima disaster, and I saw, the kind of, so, I mean, I'm not for a moment trying to say that we can prevent a natural disaster, but with early warning systems, we can really minimize the loss of life and property. So what is our preparedness in terms of early warning systems? Again, underwater domain awareness will become a very important input here. And, just to give you some more examples, if we look at the underwater space, we need a lot of work to be done. Now, how do you take science and technology forward? Now, if we just talk about the Indian Ocean or even the India's EZ, we're talking about 3.7 million square kilometers. Can we really put sensors all across? So how do we use the smart technologies? So Ambassador Mudgal also mentioned modeling and simulation. We cannot put sensors in the entire region. So how do we leverage technology? AI and particularly modeling and simulation is a very important aspect which need to cover. So all these needs to be looked at in a very holistic manner. So this is the UDA framework that we have developed. If you look at the 4 sides of the cube, they represent the 4 stakeholders that we talk about: strategic security, blue economy. I mean, each of them have their own diversity in their components. Then sustainability and climate change, and also digital transformation. The 4 sides of the cube may have their own specific requirement, but the core will always remain the acoustic capacity and capability building. If your sonar, which is being used by, irrespective of the user, if it is giving 60% degraded performance, but the developing world or the global south continues to buy these equipment from the West. some of them probably are not aware, but even people who are aware are continuously buying. I mean, there's a lot of geopolitics behind that. But at the same time, we need to be extremely aware that when we're talking about underwater domain awareness, there has to be a lot of indigenous component. So acoustic capacity building becomes the core. Now, if you look at the vertical construct, we have very little understanding of the underwater space around us. So how do we build that? So the sensing analysis, it has to be a bottom-up approach. A lot of areas are not regulated at all, but there are many areas which are over-regulated. So this gives a very, structure. I would call it a comprehensive, structured, and inclusive way forward. How do we bring digital transformation for the coastal community? Can we provide them digital inputs so that they can manage their fisheries and aquaculture better? How do we get AI to these communities so that know where the potential fishing zones are? So a whole lot of work can be done. So, and if you look at this cube, the smaller cubes within the larger cube can be those projects like this part of the world. If you just look at the Indian Ocean region, this is about 25 to 30% of the global population. So how do we make our young people employable is also, I mean, we have to look at the oceans for more and more employment and for more and more engagement, I would say. So I can go on this, but I think this kind of brings a lot of structure. So how do we bring in policy intervention, technology intervention, and capacity and capability building can be kind of built through this. Now, we talk about marine spatial planning. I mean, marine spatial is nothing but the digital transformation in the marine space, or I would call it the larger underwater space, including the freshwater systems. Now, if you can see this heat map in the Indian subcontinent, this actually represents the underwater noise because of shipping. The low frequency noise, which is also responsible for big whale strandings. Now, in the western coast of India, we have seen a massive spike in the big whale stranding. So it's a very serious sustainability concern. So this kind of map can be used by multiple stakeholders. I mean, just to give you a sense, the low frequency is also the submarine deployment frequency. So for a defense application also, something like this can be used. Where do you effectively deploy a submarine? But from the other side, from a marine conservation side, also this is very important because you know where the noise is high. So now, not that I'm trying to be a showstopper that, you stop shipping, but at least in the, biologically critical or moments, when there is breeding season, you can at least divert the shipping traffic. So a lot of policy decision from an environmental perspective can be taken. So this kind of digital transformation becomes very, very critical. So we have gone further to this. This is just one example I'm trying to state, but a similar heat map can be also used for navigability in the coastal region. Coastal navigation is now giving more importance because water transport is always far more efficient. So this can be used for that. In terms of fish stock also, if you know where the fish stock is, you can really do the planning of the coastal region far better. So multiple applications. So this is what even the UNESCO is also trying to promote globally. How do we promote marine spatial planning, digitization? And as Mudgal sir was mentioning, my colleague Catherine Shlok and the entire MRC team under his guidance, we have come to put together a handbook which will be published in a month or two. I mean, the manuscript is ready and it's going to come out very soon. So it really tries to bring the larger concept of MSP on the ground. How will you implement it on the ground is what we are trying to, and looking at all the aspects of policy intervention, technology intervention, and capacity and capability building. Now, when we talk about the acoustic capacity and capability building, there are three steps to it. I mean, to see, to understand, and to share. To see is the sensor and the platform. Platform could be an autonomous underwater vehicle or a ship or, a surface, subsurface, manned, unmanned, any kind of vehicle. So this would be the hardware. To see is the hardware, the sensor and the platform which will carry the sensor to the appropriate place. So some of it we can definitely import. But the second part, once you collect the data using these sensors, to understand has to be an indigenous effort. And particularly when we talk about the tropical waters are very, very different. As I said, 60% degradation. So unless we mitigate the tropical challenges, we are not going anywhere. I mean, the data is not usable. And this data is extremely classified. Many times nations are not able to cooperate because the data is highly classified. So we need to look at capacity building where, the local indigenous people or indigenous effort is kind of encouraged. And the third is to share. Now, whatever actionable inputs you have, it has to be shared with the user in real time. But typically what happens is, the user is varied. I mean, right from a policymaker who requires a very certain type of data, but he has the luxury of having a very comfortable office. But what about a fisherman on the ground? The digital input has to reach him in real time. He doesn't have the luxury to carry a laptop. So how do we build mobile apps? And in a format, I mean, if it is a shrimp farmer of a particular species, say L. venomai, he needs input of that in his, he is not bothered about anything else. So we have to make it very specific. And I think when we talk about Indo-Japan collaboration, I think India has the strength to provide the young, smart talent. I mean, the demography, but Japan has really been much ahead in terms of the cutting edge technology. So this partnership can really bring a lot of positive results for the entire global community. The entire digital transformation can be best handled through this collaboration. I want to go a step further too. And one more thing I want to highlight is today when we talk about any exchange of know-how and support, this to see, to understand, and to share comes in one package. It's like a mobile phone. You only use 10% of the features that are there, but you pay so much more. The global south cannot afford to kind of put so much of sensors. So how do we build this up? Even the previous, this MSP that you saw, we have not put sensors to collect this data. We used a modeling and simulation effort using the automated identification system data. We have built this, and the sensor deployment will be only at very select location where we will validate the model. And once the model is validated, this can be replicated across the entire region. You can get so much more, return on investment going forward. The next thing is how the manpower is required for digital transformation. High-end data analytics, we need people who will do the computational infrastructure, the algorithm development, and the entire. But once that data is collected, that has to be interpreted by domain experts. I mean, it can be technical or science people, also disciplines also, but also the liberal arts discipline, political science, various other geopolitics, international relations. So we need domain specialists to look at it. But the third part is more interesting for me, field deployment specialists. The field deployment specialists could be the coastal community. Rather than making, I mean, you imagine the coastal community being part of the entire digital transformation initiative. With a little, I mean, we don't need to teach them. They could probably teach us how to deal with the waterfront, deployment of various equipment. So we need to look at this in a very, very nuanced way where it becomes very inclusive. Even the coastal community who are very comfortable with the water bodies, they can be part of this whole field deployment with a little bit of skilling that is required. So we have developed those skilling programs as well. So I think I'll stop here and hand over back to Nishtha. So in terms of the Indo-Japan collaboration, I think there's so much more we can do together. Japan has been at the forefront. They have developed a lot of hardware, a lot of, they have been sailing across the world, collecting data. So the Indian demography and the Japanese, comfort with the oceans can be a great partnership, and we really look forward to working together. Back to you, Nishtha. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful presentation. Now, I think we'll move on to the next speaker. Without further ado, we have Dr. Mingyao Zhu, who is a senior research fellow, research fellow at the Ocean Policy Research Institute at the Sasakawa Foundation since 2020. She received a PhD in aquatic bioscience at the University of Tokyo, and her research field is marine management and policy, primarily focusing on fishery stock assessment using models such as spatio-temporal models, marine ecosystem models, and recruitment forecasting models, among others. So the floor is open for you, Dr. Zhu. You can take over. Thank you.
Thank you for your introduction, and nice to meet you again, everyone. This is Mingyao Zhu. I'm from the Ocean Policy Research Institute. I'm a colleague of Emma Zhu, and today I'm so honored and happy to be here to do some presentation to share my research. So today I can talk about a research project I was involved in. It's called Building a Digital Ocean Society. So my topic is almost focused on the marine digital transformation part. And in this project, I'm focused on to introduce our outcomes, that is visualizing the annual transformation of ocean policy in Japan using text mining technology. So about our research project, the building a digital ocean society. So our aim is to realize the Society 5 in the ocean. So what is Society 5? Actually, in a very brief word, now we are in the Society 4. The Society 4 has a lot of problems and we need to solve. And in Society 5, that means we can use the big data and also by using the artificial intelligence to connect the cyberspace with the physical space to solve a lot of problems we are facing now, of course, in the ocean or in our society. So our project is called the Building a Digital Ocean Society. That is to gather the wide variety of information from the ocean and through the use of big data in the ocean to achieve an advanced fusion of cyberspace and the physical space in the ocean. And there's a two main pillar in this project. One is called the ocean visualization, and another one is the ocean space collaboration. So with these two pillars, we want to have a better marine domain awareness, and finally we can realize the Society 5 in our ocean. So today I gonna talk about why we're going to use the text mining to analyze the marine policy. Actually, as you mentioned that the sustainable use of our ocean is very important, including solving marine issues scientifically and become more scientifically. We need more data. With the rapid development of the diverse ocean observation technologies, ocean data actually grows very fast in last decade, and it almost forms the ocean big data. But the study of the data based on marine policy making is still inadequate. Now, as a Ocean Policy Research Institute or Ocean Policy think tank, we think it's very important for us to promote this kind of data-based marine policy making, and especially for the utilization of the text data of the marine policy is very important. So actually in Japan, there are a lot of ministries exist that related to the ocean. For example, there are Ministry of the Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, and also the Ministry of the Land, Infrastructure, Transport, Tourism, and the Ministry of the Environment and so on. So all this kind of ministry just influence or determine some kind of marine policy, and they published a relevant white paper each year actually. So as a result, the policy interaction among this ministry in Japan is very complicated. A quantitative and simplified quantification of these policies is essential for improving ocean governance in Japan, also around the world. However, to our best of knowledge, the temporal trend of the ocean policy in different ministry has not been examined based on some technology, for example, the text mining analysis. So our objective is to use the text mining to analyze the text data from the multiple white papers to comprehensively visualize the annual transformation of ocean policy in Japan and to clarify the similarities and differences in their concerns or hot topic of various ocean-related organizations that published the white paper. Our method is including 5 steps. The first one is, of course, the data selection. We select the white paper because the white paper is an annual report outlining the status of the political, environmental, social, and government measures, and published online and available to the general public. So everyone can check out this white paper, and this white paper plays a very important role in policymaking process. So we choose 3 different kind of white papers. The first one is a fishery white paper, which is issued by the fishery agency in Japan. Another one is an environment white paper, is issued by the Ministry of the Environment. And the last one is the ocean white paper. Actually, it is issued by our OPRI, Ocean Policy Research Institute. Next is the data collection of this kind of white paper just published online in PDF files. So we just use some AI technology and also with the manual to extract the data from the PDF files by excluding the figures, tables, footnotes, footers, and so on. And so this is a kind of time-consuming step actually in this study. And then the step 3 and 4 is about the data pre-processing and data mining. We do this 2 steps in an application called Cage Coder to automatically analyze the text data by and developed by a college in Japan. So previously we do the morphological analysis. This is the analysis to segment the sentences into words. And then we do the LJ topic model. This is a model, a natural language processing technology to discover the patterns of words and summarize the underlying topic structures in our text data. The last one is interpretation of the result. In fact, the topic model is an unsupervised machine learning technology. So we need to do some expert interviews, for example, to interpret our result, to make sure our result is find the right way to all of the text data. So we do 3 kind of expert interviews were conducted with officials from the fishery agency, from the Ministry of the Environment, and also from our inside OPRI. So as a result, here's a correspondence analysis result. This is a multivariate analysis that maps multidimensional aggregated data into a 2-dimensional space to visually represent the relationship among the data elements. So as a result, you can find that there are 3 groups very perfectly divided. So each group just represent each white paper. So we can tell that each white paper just have their own topic. And then we just analyze the numbers of the topic for each white paper. For the fishery white paper, there are 14 topics. The environment white paper, there are 20 topics, and ocean white paper, there are 18 topics. So I'm gonna introduce one of this result. This is the 14 topics of the fishery white paper. We can have, for each topic, we can get the top 10 terms with their probabilities of their occurrence. So based on this top 10 terms, we can summarize each topic. For example, for topic 1, the first word is the resource. The second one is the secure. The third one's a technology. So based on this kind of terms or words, maybe the topic 1, we can summarize the topic 1 as a technology and system for securing the fishery resource. And then we have the LG heat map for these 14 topics. So this heat map is actually an annual transition of these 14 topics, and the color scale just represented the proportion of each topic in each year. So we can find some hot topic in some years, and then we will do the cluster analysis for these 14 topics. As a result, the 14 topics just divided into 4 clusters along the time. So and for each cluster have their own hot topics. So we can tell that in the fishery white paper, the hot topic just transferred very clearly by the time. Actually, the major transition in topics occurred all of these 3 white papers over the time. Though for the fishery white paper and the environment white paper, so actually this two kind of white paper just issued by the government institution. So this topic transition were mainly caused by the revision of the relevant laws. And speaking to the ocean white paper that issued by us is NGO. So this topic transition will closely relate to the development of the worldwide ocean initiatives. And the expert interviews revealed that the experts' view on the topic and the transition of the policy focus were generally consistent with our analysis result. And here I want to pick up one of the big issues, that is the Great East Japan earthquake just happened in 2011. And to this kind of big issue, all of the white paper, the 3 of the white paper, just all responded. But the responses and the reaction differed among the ministry, and each ministry or institution had different interests or their unique topics. So the fishery agency just responded in 2011 very rapidly, and they're concerned are resource management and the fisheries. Our OPRI just responded in 1 year later in 2012. We are concerned is the tsunami damage and the related education. The Ministry of the Environment responds the same year 2012. Their concerns are nuclear regulation and power generation. So to conclude our discussion, the text mining provide a very singular and clear picture of the overall framework of the white paper, including not only more concise topic and their annual variation, but also topic transition, which provides scientific reference for future policy decisions. And it is possible to efficiently analyze the vast specialist among annual report using the text mining to obtain useful information, even starting point. But as an unsupervised machine learning technology, the interpretation of this result requires relevant expert knowledge. For example, we can do the expert interview. So as to our topics today, actually, I think the collaboration between Japan and India is very important, and there's a lot of things we can do in the future. But before the collaboration, of course, the data-based science, the nature science is very important, but the data-based social science, for example, the analysis of the policy for each country, for India, for Japan, by analyzing the policy, maybe you can find the difference and the similarity between us, and we can find the gap, we can find the collaboration point by analyze our policy in our country. So I hope maybe we in the future we can this taxonoming of the policy can be used for our collaboration as a start point. And that is all from mine. Thank you very much for your attentions. ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Much, Ms. Zhu, for your presentation. Thank you for presenting the work that you do at the OPRI. It was a pleasure listening to your presentation. Very insightful indeed. I think we'll now move on to the next presenter. We have Dr. Imadul Islam from the Ocean Policy Research Institute at the Sasakawa Foundation as well with us. So a little bit about Dr. Islam. He's a senior research fellow at the Ocean Policy Research Institute in Japan. He's also serving as an advisor special envoy to the chairman, Royal University, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Dr. Islam served as a development expert and researcher in three different organizations before his stint with the Sasakawa Foundation, including the Center for Bay of Bengal Studies at the Independent University, Bangladesh, for research and evaluation. Over to you, Dr. Islam.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to give the special thanks my good friend, Mr. Arnab Das from Maritime Research Centers, and also one of my mentors that I called Ambassador Arnab Mogdal, and other distinguished scholar, presenter for this very timely webinar today. On behalf of Ocean Policy Research Institute, the Sasakawa Peace Foundations, we are very grateful to Maritime Research Center, particularly Mr. Arnab Das, for giving us the opportunity to talk on these particular occasions. So in my presentation, actually, many things already covered by Mr. Ambassador Arnab Mogdal and also Mr. Arnab Das, but I would like to present first about in the two segments. First one is about our organizations, what we are doing, and then I would like to focus on the one item that we would like to promote, not only me, the many of the ocean scientists and activists that we call the ocean is mother of life. So we are actually, our foundation is called Sasakawa Peace Foundation, is the sister foundation of Nippon Foundations. It was established as an individual think tank in 1986, and also as an individual think tank in the Ocean Policy Research Institute. It was founded in 1975, but it is again merged with Sasakawa Peace Foundation in 2015. As I mentioned, that is one of the biggest foundation in the world, and we have very big endowment, and we have 5 priority goals in Sasakawa Peace Foundations, and one of major goal is realization of a peaceful world through the oceans. So under this goal, we are actually operating different programs under the Sasakawa Peace Foundations. One is under the Ocean Policy Research Institute. It's under 2 divisions. One is called Division of Vision and Ocean Vision and Actions. Another is Division of Island Nations. And nowadays we are doing different activities in terms of the oceans. Our presence is all over the world. It started like that Arctic nation to the polar nations, Caribbean nation, island nation, Indian Oceans, and also the third pole, that which we call in our Indian Ocean countries, Hindu Kush Himalaya adjacent countries. So we are particularly doing in many other works in maritime security, Mandarvis Digital Ocean Society, and we have a very good presence in the international platforms, so particularly for UN, our Ocean Conference, UNESCO Ocean Decade target, and also the different level formulation of the policy in the Indian Oceans, particularly in the Pacific Ocean countries. And we are also actually contributing in the capacity building. So This is about in our organization what we are doing. We are actually commissioning the research. We are evidence-based policy making, and particularly in the sustainable ocean governance, and in highlight to always the international policy that is aligned with Japanese goal like free and open Indo-Pacific uh, tar- targets, and also the UN Ocean Decade of Action of Science. So, as I mentioned that my presentation today, I would like to focus on something. This is very relevant nowadays. So, as you know that in Japanese is traditionally one of the proverbs is called that ocean is mother of life. So, and in my presentation, I would like to try to focus on these particular matters. Um, Here is actually very recent statement made by David Attenborough, a famous director, a documentarist, and delivers a very powerful message. And he mentioned that after almost 100 years on the planet, I now understand the most important place on earth is not a land, but at the sea. So this is very clear message from one of the great activists in his lifetime. Is almost the 100 years he realized. But today, we are very much lucky that in my age and many of our young generations, they are also get receive this message from this from his philosophy that the key of in the world is sea, not in land. So how it's actually? So you know that my previous both of speakers already gave this data on these things, because in the first um, of the world, origin of life is began on the oceans, nearly that's called 3.5 billion years ago. And it's so ocean is starting point actually, and it's also the cradle of biodiversity. So it's called the home of over more than 230,000 known species. But there are many of yet to be under discovered. We are not able to discover it yet. So it's again based on the biodiversity, it's a home of species. Again, that also the Ambassador Mogdal and many of we know that we are now facing the heat stroke and climate change impact. But you know that the Earth excess heat, almost the 90%, actually absorbs by the sea. It's like mother. They always actually took the all responsibility, all painful situation to guide or to nurture their children in that way. And also the carbon emission is their ocean absorb almost the 30%. But it is the source of the our all types of protein. It's about 3 billion people, their job, their livelihood, and everything. And as Ambassador Muda also mentioned, that is the half of the oxygen of the world. So all of this data, and it's scientific items, and many of these, it's directly we claim that the ocean is the mother of life. So, and if we go to the another big statement, we call that the ocean is not just a body of water, it's the bloodstream of the global economy. So, you know, again, the global economy is totally depends on the oceans. 80% of our shipping and many other port activities and our economic return is come from the oceans. So, if we're talking about the connectivity, if we're talking about the power, if we're talking about the all of relevant activities done by the major power, minor power, soft power, it's all depend on the waters, and it's proved today. And it's always called that ocean is again, there is the potential for $3 trillion blue economy and the prospects. But all of these are under threats. So this is the one of that there are many index prepared by different think tanks, different scientists, but it's a one of that is very recent. You see, if we go to the all of these just visual presentation, all are red. So we are luckily India, Japan, and we are in the Indian Ocean parameters. And you see that in the right side in the Indian Oceans, it's almost the sea surface temperature. It's totally toxic situations, and it's increased very rapidly. And also when we're talking this mother of life is under threat, and this for work and advocacy purpose we call the ocean health. I think the Maritime Research Centers and all of the think tanks that we are talking about, underwater domain awareness, and everything is about to healthy health situations for the oceans. So there's again some scientific evidence, that IPCC prepared the adverse impact from human caused climate change is actually continuing to intensify. We know that all of it's like water availability in the food production and their health and well-being, city settlement, biodiversity and ecosystem, and everything is under threat of climate change. If we believe, yes, there are multiple countries, the leaders, the scientists, still they are not believing and they are not participating in the journey. But in the Robinson, the one of scientists, he actually prioritizes based on the climate change impact in the global context in the 14 biggest environmental threats. And out of these 14 biggest environmental threats, 5 is directly relevant to the what we call in ocean. So even in the day before yesterday, the Peter Thompson, the special envoy, and as a great champion of ocean sustainable governance, and he mentioned that actually global human health is intrinsically linked to the health of the ocean. So we cannot actually make difference the human health and the ocean health. So if you would like to survive in this planet, we should think about this in the human health. And while we're talking, is the first come in the again in the climate change, and the one very bad things which actually we contributed as a human being, because that's called the plastic pollutions. So if we go to the again the impacts of environmental stressors, like that is it's almost the wall science data proved that the coral reef is totally bad. So it's up to the 90% of the coral reefs could vanish by the 2050. So can you imagine how much big challenges for that is? Here is the some narration in the even in the religion, those who are believe, because our life in human life and the coral life is totally what would I say, side by side. If coral reach coral is available in the oceans, the human life is still continue. If it is died, so here is some indigenous belief that our human life would be also dead. So this is very much important, but science again is also believed that there is very few years, only 20 years or 25 years is remaining to actually conserve the coral reef. So again, if as I mentioned in the previous slide, you people also know that the sea surface temperatures it's increasing, it's increased very rapidly. and also the ocean pollution. The pollutions, the one item actually, particularly this single-use plastic or the different types of plastic, and it's using the chemical. It's all situations. The data reveal that 8 billion of plastic is already in the ground of oceans. So here, one very big argument that even in our main source of protein from the ocean is we call that fisheries. So in almost microplastic now found almost 60% of fisheries. So how much dangerous in this, and also the due to the what would I say, the climate change impact, the iceberg melting very fast, and we are living in the one another big what would I say, we actually most of the time define it's called that third pole, that is Hindu Kush Himalaya. In this Hindu Kush Himalaya, the glacier is melting very fast. So if this is happening and with this particular time, that assume that uh, due to the severe sea level rise, 900 million people in acute dangers. And it's again the food and water security. Till to date, even in we are now in very advanced technological age, 2 billion population, they are the insecure about their what would I say, water. So pure drinking water is not available. Even there's everywhere is the water. So yes, so in the policy institute like Sasakawa Peace Foundation and the Ocean Policy Research Institute, we are from the front line to working not only in the policy, we are also working in the very ground level, evidence-based research on particular items. But we are also contributing in the global climate change agreement and ocean protection efforts. So, for example, if we see the key milestone of global climate and biodiversity agreements, this is started in 1987 in the Marine Protocol, and the very success and champion one is the Kyoto Protocol, and then 1992 was also the UN Framework Convention on the Climate Change, Paris Agreement. Uh, and the very important things is very much relevant. It's called Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So in this framework actually now set up the targets for the planet, for the oceans, that it's called 30 by 30 target to protect our ocean, planet, and biodiversity. So this is actually very much relevant to the slogan of these days. Today is World Ocean Day. It's called the wonder that sustaining what sustain us and we can also go the conserving what conserve arts. So it's need to the again is a come to the think tanks, their role in protecting their vast mother of land and oceans, to ensure these 30 by 30 targets through their initiatives, in that way, in innovations, explorations, and many other ways through scientific, interdisciplinary research, and many others, simulation and model development. So again, here is some key organization working on these particular items. Is we all know this UNESCO, and they develop the intergovernmental oceanographic commissions, and also that my previous speaker also mentioned that we have on very visual targets, 10 priorities, and it's also aligned with the 30-30 target. It's called the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So all of these target, even when my colleagues is now in Nice, Dr. Joe, maybe she know better than me, but what I follow that we found that we are also set up the another target, how to achieve the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework to protect to our oceans. So, and to prioritize their our oceans. So The limitation is here, that we have the Sustainable Development Goal, Paris Agreement, many other things that we are trying to control our carbon emissions and also the heat, but we are already failure. But the main items we need to focus on, how can we see the in the future. So I would like to share some things in here. That what we are doing in particularly, uh, we are doing many things. The one particular project we launched in the Indian Oceans, 6 island developing states. We know that Indian Ocean is the third largest bay, and Great Middle Bay we call, and it's the 1/3 of the shipping line is here. And the main important thing is here the people is almost 3 billion people lives is here. So, and it's directly 1.9 billion peoples there in the coast. Their livelihood totally depends again with their mother. So we are launching a project. It's called the Enhancing Connectivity and Resilience, assessing the climate-induced economic and non-economic loss and damage in the Indian Ocean island nations. We also include India. So India, the part of the Andaman and Nicobar Island, and the 6 countries is called Madagascar, Maldives, Mauritius, Seychelles, Sri Lanka, and Comoros. So it's all about that. Before going to do anything, we are talking about the science. Science is based on the evidence. So we would like to again create the database. We are also going to give some evidence. So the 6 small island states, some data is here. That all of there is a one common characteristic. Their mainland is very small, but their exclusive economic zone is very, very big. So again, the ocean is big, so we need to protect it. So here's I would like to mention that another things, how is why is important to the not only for the adjacent country of Indian Ocean, these 32 countries, it's also important for actually Japan. In the Japanese parameter, that 78% of the crude minerals is the shipping line is come to the Indian Oceans. So the security, the traditional security and the non-traditional security is everything is important. If there is something happen due to the climate change, and so it's directly impact to the Japanese economy. And since the Japanese economy also, there are multiple Asian, Central Asian countries, their economy depends on the Japan. So it's collectively also impact on this Asia. So we are actually conducting this research. One of the toolkit that is produced by IIED. So it's called Comprehensive Climate Impact Quantification. So we are again going through interdisciplinary research is the pure science, and to assess the all types of climate directly impact on the ocean relevant issues. So so the report actually here. Sorry. Sorry. So, the report actually mentioned previous research that IPCC that even there is a rapidly narrowing window of opportunity enable the climate resilient development. So if you go to the recent report that was in 2023, and they mentioned some of the condition to enable this, and the one condition there was a collective efforts. So for this collective efforts, the India, Japan could play, not only the Indian Ocean countries with the Japan's experience, we can actually share our information together. We can launch our program together to protect and conserve our ocean biodiversity. Again, if we go to the global effort to conserve this, that I'm talking about, since we are at the Ocean Policy Research Institute, in the policy level. So in the policy level, the era that they actually did, we can actually divide it in the 3 era. We call the first era, it was in the mitigations before 2000. It started with the 1992, the UNFC. formed. And the second data, again, after the 2001, that is called, we actually promoting the adaptations. But the third data, we are now talking about the loss and damage. We are now talking about the 30-30 targets. So many things is come, but the all of things actually mostly relevant to the how sustainably use these oceans for our motherland. So this is actually something that we are using in the comprehensive climate impact quantifications. At the research part, we are trying to give them actually explore the precipitating factors and predisposing factors, and so also the protective factors, and it's actually lead to the what types of vulnerabilities there. Then we also go the economic some simulation model analysis, so both intrinsic and tangible and intangible. And the core nobility of this research, we are not only the focus on the economic impact, it's also focused combinedly in the non-economic item, and not only the just stop in the one item. So we also develop the solution framework. What is the responsibility for to ensure the resilient ocean or ocean communities or coastal communities? So what are the responsibility for the coastal people? What are the responsibility for the national people, countries? And what is the responsible for the international communities? So since we are talking about that, we are actually, as organizations, we are contributing in the many way. We are the biggest partner of UNESCO and United Parameters. So here is a call that one is under the Ocean Digit platform, operated by the UNESCO. So it's called the Foundation Dialogue. So we are going to host this foundation dialogue. It's fifth foundation dialogue, and again we are also give the slogan for this foundation dialogue. It's called the ocean is the mother of life. So you can relate to my lecture on this thing, that we try to give the message to the international community that we should actually, if we can protect our mother, so the children automatically they can protect themselves. So another thing is the international community. Even we are talking about the ocean is now key, but when you're going to the SDG is the 14.1, so you will find that the development budget for this SDG is only 0.001. So we have needed for 15 billion for protecting the shorelines, but we only get from the our own countries and generation is only 1 billion. So we are talking more, but we are not actually given in this way. But this foundation dialogue, we are going to host in 3 to 5th September, and we are come out with the different statements, Tokyo statements. And what's actually I would like to, I'm very close to finish that. The what types of major projects actually we are now commissioning, that we, as I mentioned, that in Indian Ocean, comprehensive climate impact quantifications. We also planning to the Island Summit in 2026, and we actually tried to build up to this project the Indian Ocean Island Countries Leader Summit, and what we have a very good presence is called Pacific Countries Leaders Meeting, the PALM. So and also we have other division of ocean vision and actions that that we are going to organize the fifth foundation dialogue and Asia Empowerment Project, that's called Smart Ocean Port Connectivity in Bangladesh, Indonesia, and many other countries. And we have also the project in the Indian Oceans that we mentioned, and that's called Third Pole Projects. It was actually collaborated with the Isimud and Bay of Bengal adjacent countries. We are conducting, is Jusan also commissioning the research and very pure scientific research, eDNA analysis, and we are also doing the different types of research. But in addition, we are also conducting the capacity development. The Sasakawa, we call the Sasakawa Fellowship in the World Maritime University, and also we try to promote the Sasakawa model of community-based tourism in the island nation. So this particular project is for I just mentioned point here in very few. There are many few projects also in commissioning by my other colleagues. So what the recommendation and how can actually we collaborate as because we have some experience, expertise, and we have a particular missions. I think Maritime Research Centers also has some missions on it. So since we are focusing on not only the country by country, it's also the region. So when you're talking is the third pole, when you're categorized in the Indian Oceans, so we can actually form an Indian Ocean Island Countries Leaders Forum, and we are actually day by day conduct the commission the research and funding, and joint program also designed in highlight to the achieving the UN decade action goal. So as I mentioned that everything is actually from when we are working in the think tank groups in highlight to the global goal. So the global goal, maybe it was determined within this UN Ocean conference. So we should focus on these, and we can develop some research and collaborations, and also the promotion of 3030 agenda. So 3030 agenda is one of main agenda is marine protected area. So if people have the expertise, we have expertise, we can launch this project together, and the promotion of the connectivity and resilience for the welfare of the 2 billion of the coastal communities. So it's again the people participation, coastal people, their life and livelihood is important. We should think about in that way. And the very important things, even we call the ocean is the mother of life. Ocean is 70%. If we are going to actually, again, in our human body is a 70% is the water. So our earth is also, this planet is also the 70% of water. But when you are going to our education curriculum, you will really find that at the very beginning of the stage, we are studying about oceans. So what we should do, that we can also collaborate if there is any idea that is promotion of the ocean literacy in the Indian Ocean countries. So the one thing from my research in the plastic pollutions that I found that only we can solve the problem to creating the awareness among the very early stage of the education through promotion the environmental educations in our curriculum. So it's 40%, more than 40% problem could be solved. Uh, Again, I'm sorry. Maybe I don't know whether as I take more time, but I would like to again mention that uh, water is important, ocean is important, ocean is the mother of life. As Alfred Mahan is mentioned, whoever control in the Indian Oceans, they will dominate the Asia. This is the actually power things, and we should protect our mother oceans. Our life depends on her health. So we should again thinking about the ocean health. And again, I would like to say that the ocean is our past, it's our present, and it is our future. So let's protect it with purpose. With this, I must say thank you on behalf of the Ocean Policy Research Institute, the Sasakawa Peace Foundations. I must say thank you to Ambassador Anup Mugdal, my good friend Arnav Dash, and also my colleague Dr. Jo. She is it's very early for her to walk up, but she shared her one of research for future collaboration, and also those who are joining today virtually and those who will listen this in future. We must say that everybody should concern to protect our mother health, the ocean health, and be activist and be what would I say, promote. Thank you so much.
you so much, Dr. Islam, for making really good points about the ocean's health on today's very important occasion of the World Oceans Day, and for giving us a very strong message that ocean is the mother of life. And you also spoke about the following essential things in your presentation, including the climate shift index of the ocean, or the impact of climate change on ocean health. Then global human health linked to the health of the ocean is something that you spoke about. So thank you so much for speaking to us and for putting out such important pointers. Thanks once again. And like I mentioned before, that this event is being co-hosted by the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. So we'd like to thank the public policy think tank from Japan for partnering with us. Next, we'll move on to the next speaker. She is a very important speaker for today's webinar. We have Professor Shankari Sundaraman, who teaches at the Center for Indo-Pacific Studies, School of International Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi. She specializes in Southeast Asian and Southwest Pacific studies, Southeast Asian studies as well. And she brings over 30 years of experience in research and teaching. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Can you all hear me very clearly?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, so I'm audible and I'm visible. Thank you very much. Let me first thank the earlier panelists who have spoken so much at length in terms of the issues that are very critical in terms of how we look at the oceans and how we sort of evaluate where this entire context of cooperation towards sustenance of the ocean life becomes important. Now, having heard the speakers, I want to first of all start off with a very sincere thanks to Commander Arnab Das as well as to Ambassador Anup Mudgal for asking me to join. In his introductory remarks, Ambassador Mudgal made a statement that he and I, as Nishta has read out, we work on very different areas, particularly because I come as an area specialist on Southeast Asian studies and the larger context of how the Indo-Pacific as a mega region has today evolved and how the regional architecture is sort of shaping itself. Ambassador Das also in his presentation, I'm going to take three very important points that were made. Ambassador Das in his presentation, Commander Das in his presentation made the statement that liberal arts specialists have to come in at some point, and I think I may be able to sort of fill in the gap as a liberal arts expert and come in here. And I think the entire very important statement that Dr. Islam made towards the end of his presentation, while he quoted Alfred Mahan saying that whoever controls the Indian Ocean controls Asia, sort of will set the stage for my own presentation today, because I think what we have heard so far in all the presentations has been an excellent understanding of the the non-traditional security aspects that are critical to the region and how these NTS issues are driving the entire path forward. Now, for me as a Southeast Asian studies person or somebody who looks at international relations and studies, what you see is an evolution of an oceanic space that has come into a deeper understanding today, particularly because nation states in this region have started looking outwards. Now, if I have to sort of understand where we have to, define a term like the Indo-Pacific, I think it's very important for us to understand that we have to look at what I would call our key junctures or temporal junctures that are very important in assessing this shift towards the maritime spaces itself. One of the first things I would say in terms of key junctures is that when you look at the 2007 address made by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to the Indian Parliament, he talked about what is called the confluence of seas. Now, this confluence, what he called the confluence, and he quoted the work of Dara Shikoh, to say the confluence of seas is in terms of the merging of the maritime parameters that are evolving in the Indian and the Pacific Oceans. And today we see that the expanded notion or an understanding of what is termed as an Indo-Pacific is actually a reality. 10 years ago, The Indo-Pacific was still getting defined. Today, more and more states have come out with an Indo-Pacific identity, and there is a greater emphasis on why this identity has emerged. So, for me, the first of the critical junctures is this United States is tilting towards the east, towards what it calls the pivot to Asia, towards what it calls redefining what it was a notional absence of the US from the Asian region. Because when we talk in terms of ocean health, we talk in terms of the biodiversity, we talk in terms of the challenges in maintaining the ocean health. These parameters of the ocean's health are not maintained by the ocean itself, but are maintained by states. And this is where I want to draw a very critical juncture, because it is the states that drive the ocean health. And as a result of it, states have to act in a method that the ocean health is protected. So it is easy for us to say these are the areas, but then how do we therefore address what is the larger context of, say, global governance in terms of how you maintain the ocean health? And that's where I think a critical impact has to be understood. Now, if I take two critical junctures, like I said, the 2010 US, the pivot to Asia in 2011-12, and then later, of course, how the COVID pandemic has also pushed everybody back into an understanding of the parameters that have to be addressed in the larger context of, structural changes globally and where we are heading itself. So there is, I would say, significant temporal junctures already exist. Now, it's very important to understand how regional architecture evolves, how does it stay, because I will speak to you in terms of what I call what has been explained as the major shifts that have occurred in the context of understanding of an Indo-Pacific. Now, if we talk in terms of how 25 years ago or 30 years ago, we talked about strategic shifts that were taking place, even then we looked at, for example, structural change would be the rise of China. And we looked at it more in terms of what China could contribute, in terms of its economic weight, what was the kind of influence that China would have on matters of global affairs, and how would it therefore shape what we call the strategic environment around us. Today, there is a massive change that we see in the regional environment. There is greater intensity. There is particularly intense strategic transition that is taking place. And there is also, I think, added to the change that is taking place, a profound sense of misgiving in terms of our security architecture itself. So, at the core of the regional security architecture, when we talk in terms of not one country, but multiple countries that are beginning to shape their approach to the maritime spaces, I think there is also because one country has challenged the addition that, the context of the maritime space itself. And it's interesting that in all the presentations that I've heard so far since the morning, I have not heard the mention of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas. And it is interesting because it is the safeguarding of the UNCLOS as a global governance architecture that needs to be, sort of emphasized from my perspective or understanding. Now, what you see here is also the emergence of this regional architecture has got multiple kinds of layers. There are multiple layers in this architecture. So I'll first talk about that. Then I will go into what I call the distinct shifts that are taking place, or what is called the rescaling by several scholars. And then I will look at who are the major players and what are the security dilemmas that we are facing in terms of the Indian Ocean per se. So when you talk in terms of the mosaic of players that are there, you see multiple kinds of intergovernmental mechanisms that exist. You see, like, for example, this discussion we are having is a bilateral one in terms of the India-Japan joint approach to how to manage the global maritime spaces. Now, similarly, you have at a political level, you also have bilateral kind of mechanisms, and we've seen these kind of mechanisms that India has with a plethora of states. We've seen the India-United States 2+2 dialogue. We see the India-Japan 2+2. We've even seen the India-Australia 2+2 dialogue. So if you take all these three countries, they have a critical interest in the oceanic space. both in the Indian Ocean as well as in the Pacific Ocean. Now, apart from this bilateral dialogue, we also have what is called the trilaterals and the quadrilaterals that have emerged. And each of these has offered a kind of a layering of the regional architecture or the regional security architecture. And all these, along with collective, because Ambassador Mudgal mentioned in his opening remarks that I also work on the ASEAN region. So all these are collective responses towards a multilateral kind of a focus. And what we are looking at is that there is, I would say, a kind of a unstated kind of balance of power approach that is emerging in the entire context. Now, I mentioned in the second part of my presentation that I would look at what I called with a distinct layering, or what we call the rescaling of this expanse. When we talk in terms, I mean, if you take the Indian Ocean itself, for several years during the Cold War, it had not become a key area of contestation. And post the Cold War, we are seeing the increase of the Indian Ocean's maritime space as a contested kind of a space. Now, when we look at this emergence of this contested space, both in the Indian and the Pacific Oceans, I think what you have to understand is that the singularity of the maritime connection that these regions have is something extremely important for us to understand. And when we talk in terms of the Indo-Pacific, it's not that we're leaving out the territorial space of the Asia Pacific, because we always refer to it as the Asia Pacific. But by defining it as an Indo-Pacific or an evolutionary kind of in an evolving kind of a sense, we're not leaving the territories out, but we're making the territories as significant as the maritime spaces itself. And I think that's one interesting caveat that we need to put in. The second part is that a lot of the maritime domain today is under a kind of challenge, because we are seeing the projection of connectivity projects. For example, if you take the Chinese connectivity projects of the BRI or the 21st Century Maritime Silk Route, both these are offering to you connectivity that spreads across the territorial aspect as well as spreads across the maritime aspect. Now, where this becomes a challenge is that the expansion of these processes is also coming with a kind of an challenge in terms of how do you therefore manage it. Long-held principles of international law are getting contravened. The question of where you stand vis-a-vis the Chinese, particularly the claims on the 9-dash line, actually are eroding what we have always seen as the international law in this particular area around the South China Sea. But is there also a chance where the Pacific issues will overflow into the Indian Ocean? Because we are seeing the Indian Ocean has also become a contested space in many, many senses. So I think that for us to have a clear understanding of those two contexts remains very critical. Excuse me. The second is a functional shift that you see. In terms of this functional shift, what we are seeing is that the Asia Pacific identity as such was driven from an economic integration model, okay, where the United States had a security architecture in place for the region. But apart from that security architecture, which was known as the hubs and spokes model, beneath that, there was a very robust economic model. Now, what you're seeing in the Indo-Pacific model is that you've also seen a kind of a functional shift, because this functional shift indicates that the maritime security context that we look at becomes extremely relevant, and as a result of that, we are seeing this shift towards the importance of putting your strategic issues at the forefront as far as the maritime context is concerned. The third shift, I would say, is an institutional shift, because where are we looking at? Because today, as there is greater structural change globally at the systemic level, you're also seeing there is an institutional change that is occurring in the context of the mega region of the Indo-Pacific. So for me, this represent the kind of model that we actually talk about. Now, as far as India itself per se, I think it was Admiral Das who Commander Das who referred to the entire context of, the Hollywood to the Bollywood context. But when Admiral Harry Harris of the United States Pacific Command called this region as extending from Hollywood to Bollywood, I think it technically left the Western Indian Ocean out of the frame of reference with increasing Chinese footprint in Africa, which is also going to be something that I will discuss as we move further. So if you look at from an Indian perspective, I think what India has systematically, both in its foreign policy as well as in its security policy, has clearly defined what I would call are three interlinked and incrementally different degrees of shift towards the eastern side. That shift towards the eastern side comprises of your Look East policy. It comprises what in 2014 was rechristened as the Act East policy, and more recently what we are calling India's Indo-Pacific strategy. Okay, so if you put it towards our eastern side, we have these three policies that are incrementally different but also clearly interlinked in some senses. Now, while the Indo-Pacific for India will continue to have an emphasis on economics, on trade, on related aspects, I think we should also factor in the strategic dimensions that are extremely clear from our context. Now, while the focus on the Eastern Indian Ocean is there, I think what we have to understand is how India is looking at the Western Indian Ocean also, because I recall the entire discussion back in the 90s, not 90s, sorry, in about a decade ago, when we talked about how India holds what is called a box seat in the theater of the Indian Ocean. Now, when we talk in terms of this box seat, I want to draw the allusion to what in a theater setup, you have a special seat that juts out in the on the balcony from where the view of the stage is the best. All right. Now, the description of India holding a box seat was actually made by an Australian scholar called Sam Bateman, who referred to this because if you look at the geographical position that India has, what you call the geopolitical or the geolocational discourse that we're talking about, India is a country that juts into the Indian Ocean to the maximum, with its territorial landmass cutting the eastern and the western Indian Oceans almost into two sides. So this context of where we look at it, the way our trade is moving through it, and this entire notion of how do you therefore protect the sea lines of communication is one of the most important factors from an Indian perspective itself. And I think this is where the primary interest that India has is in the Indian Ocean, because the expanding footprint of other countries in the Indian Ocean is something that India has always been clearly concerned about. You look at, for example, piracy, attacks on ships in the Western Indian Ocean. Even in 2008, we've had joint anti-piracy activities with China. But more recently, as you've seen China's expanding footprint all across South Asia. The very fact that the subcontinent has a Chinese expanding footprint also determines how we have to look at our oceanic space itself. Now, in the context of the architecture of the oceans itself, let me just sort of add that what we're looking at in terms of the regional architecture is that the architecture is characterized by a great deal of fragmentation. I was at a meeting recently, when somebody made the statement that what we are seeing in our region is fragmented multipolarity. Okay. Now, the lack of political unity, the question of, and this is where I think all the three papers that were presented, all the four papers presented before I spoke, have all addressed key issues in the ocean, but we have to address the fact that there is minimal synergy that is there among the major actors in the ocean. So in that sense, if I'm sounding a bit pessimistic, my apologies for that, but I want to actually sort of open up the discussion, because ultimately, in terms of talking, in terms of advocacy, in terms of cohesiveness, in terms of cooperation, how do we initiate that? and why is it lacking becomes a key factor. And this is where I think that when we have to protect the mother of the earth, all its children have to play a role. And I think, Dr. Islam, I'm sort of taking a line from your statement that the mother has to be protected only through the actions of all children concerned. So that in that context itself, what you see is, because of this fragmented kind of an approach to the security architecture, you see a heightened sense of geopolitics. You see that stakeholders are not, addressing both challenges in traditional as well as non-traditional security. And you see that the regions that are bordering the Indian subcontinent or the South Asian region are also witnessing the rise of environmental challenges and other factors that are pushing this entire context forward. So, the context is that I wanted to sort of emphasize again that as global players continue to look at this entire region of the Indo-Pacific, I think what we have to do is to identify how the importance of the Indian Ocean lies connected to the entire geography of the region, and that you cannot look at the Indian Ocean or any of these oceanic spaces in a kind of a mutually exclusive compartment, and discuss the need for how do we therefore address it. Now, in his opening remarks, Ambassador Mudgal referred to two very interesting points, what he called the tangibles and the intangibles. Okay. Now, if I have to take a card from his page out of his presentation, I think this reference to the tangible and the intangible becomes extremely important, because the tangible is that the economic rise of both India and China, along with the rise of other kinds of non-traditional security threats that have been discussed by all our panelists. I think there is a need for us to understand that both economics as well as your security, whether it is NTS, non-traditional security, or traditional security, are intricately tied into each other. So as global trade increases, you see that the context of what I said earlier about the Indian Ocean having been sort of not having seen a major impact during the Cold War. I think today, as you see, small states in the region are leveraging their geography, the geopolitical dynamics of major power rivalry. All these are getting projected in terms of the impact on the ocean itself. Now, in that context, I wanted to say that I want to bring in three major, I would say, a bit of a discussion on the three major kinds of countries that are involved in the oceanic areas today, particularly the Indian Ocean. First, you have what is called the resident powers of the Indian Ocean. Then you have other countries that are, well, what you call non-resident powers, but are super major powers in the region. And then you have the small island and the littoral states of the region, And I think this becomes a very interesting kind of a way in which we look at it, because all these actors, we've talked about fisheries, we've talked about energy security, we've talked about environmental degradation to the region itself, what the oceans, or the questions on the challenges of biodiversity and how you therefore preserve biodiversity in the ocean. We've heard these in all the presentations. But in all these presentations, I think if nation states continue to pursue national interest at the expense of the oceanic life, I think all our discussions will become futile, because as the Indian Ocean evolves into a kind of a important theater, I think all countries have to look towards identifying common interest, identifying basic security parameters, identifying which are the stakeholders that will drive the governance of the ocean, and how will states continue to cooperate in order to ensure the sustenance of the ocean. Because we've talked about climate change. Climate change is something that is going to impact, for example, every single country in this oceanic extent, in terms of particularly the littoral states of the where their entire existential crisis emerges from climate change. We cannot talk about any of these factors without putting this into larger context of our understanding. So when I talk in terms of the major players, I think one of the major players would be India. Say India has to take a leading role, in my view, because this is a sea line of vital communication for India and broader maritime security in terms of its capacity to address both traditional and non-traditional challenges become so much more important. And and I want to also share on cases where India issues. For example, during the tsunami of 2004, during the Jakarta earthquake, I lived in Asia at the time when the Jakarta earthquake took place in 2006. India was one of the primary, or the what you call the first responder to provide security access to those countries, the regions that were affected, not the countries, the regions that were affected. So in that sense, India is a major player. Regardless of what we may think of the United States' current situation with with President Trump calling in terms of the America First policy, I think regardless of all these political dynamics that are shaping the United States, the US policy towards Asia is also governed by its access to the Indian Ocean and what it sees as its important role in the region. So there is, without a doubt, the United States will continue to be a major player. And when you see that the United States has actually strengthened its Indian Ocean initiatives through things like the Indian Ocean Strategic Review Act of 2024, you also see it is talking in terms of, I would say, clear parameters. How do you therefore promote economic interests? How do you therefore address the freedom of navigation? How do you therefore talk in terms of cooperation with like-minded partners such as India, France, Australia? All these are going to be factoring in a very, very critical kind of a context. The third, I would say, important actor will continue to be China, because this whole notion of China as a structural change, or the rise of China, the debate entirely has actually now shifted. Throughout, I remember 30 years back, we were talking about China both as a status quo or a revisionist power. And I always give the example that one of the best examples of China as a revisionist power is what you see in its entire imprint in the South China Sea dispute. Because, I'm sure we're speaking in a what you call in a private way in terms of no quotation and all that, but individually countries have accepted that there is going to be never a code of conduct that is going to be established in the South China Sea, for example. And it's a very interesting thing, because all this while, when we talk in terms of its status quo or revisionism, if you see the Chinese approach to the South China Sea debate systematically over the last I would say about 25 years, you see that by 1990, when the Chinese were basically 35 years actually, 1990, when the Chinese were normalizing relations with the rest of Southeast Asia, they talked in terms of joint cooperation and joint exploration of resources in the South China Sea. By 2002, there was what is called a declaration on a code of conduct, which was supposed to become a binding code of conduct. By 2011, when the discussions on the UNCLOS's limits of the continental shelf started, that is when you started seeing the erosion of the South China Sea space systematically by the Chinese, and it hasn't ended. So any kind of movement towards this code of conduct is not going to take place. There is a very clear, important, we've spoken about the energy security issues. Regardless of this, China's energy demands are going to push its interests in the Indian Ocean. It sees it as a vital route. The whole context of Chinese access to the seas, Chinese insecurity over the Straits of Malacca, all these issues are going to feature critically. And if you see the increase, that's why I said to discuss the African context later. If you see the context of how China has responded both to South Asian states as well as to African states, I think there is a great question of how Chinese rise is actually impacting the region. Now, I'll focus a little bit in terms of multilateralism and how multilateralism has been largely ineffective in the context. What you see today in terms of, and this is where I want to draw from what Ambassador Mutkal said of my speciality in terms of working on multilateralism, particularly in the context of the ASEAN. Now, regardless of the engagement that ASEAN has, or the engagement that India ASEAN has, and that impacting the Indian Ocean region, I think there has been very little effort by the ASEAN to actually move forward on this entire context of how do you address oceanic oceanic systems, for example. And they have not even been able to have any kind of success in pulling the Chinese into a greater multilateral focus, because that has actually got quite very badly eroded. And I would say that in the context of this, there is what you see a certain the loss of centrality. I mean, all of you would have heard about centrality of ASEAN. We've talked about it ad nauseum. What exactly is the centrality all about? Because other than paying lip service to centrality, nothing effective is happening on the ground. So the context is that how do you therefore evolve mechanisms that are new? That's exactly why I said the institutional rescaling has to take place, or the institutional shifts have to take place, because you cannot address it without that. Other countries which are also going to remain important are countries like Australia, which will automatically have an impact on how the oceanic systems are managed. Now, in terms of the final part of my presentation, I will look at how there are two, I would say, main sources of insecurity in the Indian Ocean. The first itself is the instability of many of the littoral states of the Indian Ocean, and I think this is something that we have to factor in. There also the question of how non-traditional security issues such as sea piracy, maritime piracy, terrorist activities. This is something that is going to remain extremely important for India in all its engagements, because we mentioned, I think it was Commander Arnab Das mentioned about why post the November 2008 attack on Mumbai attacks, we had this entire context of how do you therefore address maritime domain awareness? Because any kind of maritime domain awareness that we are talking about has to factor in the kind of risks that India faces. And this is exactly where the context of MDA becomes extremely important for us. Other sources of insecurity apart from this is also, like I said, having identified the players, the question of great power rivalry, and where does great power rivalry basically impact the region itself. I think I'm running out of time, so let me wrap it up quickly. I think the tensions that we've seen in terms of emerging naval powers, whether it's an Indian naval power, today the Chinese Navy operates almost as one of the foremost navies of the region. And it's, what you're seeing is Chinese Navy also offers a critical threat to how the Indian Ocean region is going to be managed. Okay. Now, apart from that, what you also see is that the kind of expanded, I would say, efforts that India has put in terms of trying to expand its naval diplomacy across the region, and why it's addressing naval diplomacy as a core factor becomes very important for us. And I think the second aspect, which I said, which I think I already mentioned it earlier, is what is the impact of spillover issues that come from the Pacific Ocean into the Indian Ocean. Because if you look at the competition for regional leadership, both in East and Southeast Asia, this is where the China-US rivalry is coming very much to the forefront. We've just concluded, just a couple of days ago, last week, the Shangri-La dialogue was concluded. And the kind of responses that we saw, sort of, intensification of the US-China rivalry is what we're going to see from this kind of a sense. And other United States partners and, allies of the United States, whether it is Japan, whether it is Australia, all these are going to get factored in and get pulled into the dynamics of this entire Sino-US rivalry, which is going to be very critical in the time to come. So let me sort of stop here, and perhaps if there are any questions and answers, I'll take. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Sundari, for your fantastic presentation, wherein you spoke about how the Indo-Pacific was, 10 years ago, it was still being defined, and the ocean itself. You also made a very critical point that ocean itself cannot manage the health of the ocean. It is managed by the states and the the surrounding areas there. You also spoke about how rise of China is impacting the Indo-Pacific region. Plus, you also spoke about the main sources of insecurity in the Indian Ocean region. Yes. So I think these were very crucial points that you made. Thank you very much. And now I would open the floor for people to make the comments, or if they have any questions from the speakers who made their presentations till now, they can ask. So any questions, if there are any feedback, comments?
There is one question in the chat box. Under the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness announced in 2022 in Tokyo, can cooperation on UDA be explored for protection of submarine cables, seabed mapping, and sonar network deployment? Certainly, Mr. Gaurav Datta has asked this question. Certainly, it's a very important issue. I mean, submarine cable, which supports 97% of connectivity globally, deep sea mining or seabed mapping is a very critical aspect. Sonar network deployment is an important aspect. But unfortunately, the West, I mean, if you just look at the Tokyo summit itself, it was, we did announce the leaders did announce what is called the, data sharing for greater public good. But the problem is that, the data sharing, the mechanism that exists, is grossly inadequate. I mean, it's a security network of data centers which is there, and security establishments, as you know, are highly sensitive to any data sharing. So those mechanisms are just not adequate. Or even I would go a step further to ask a question that, are these security agencies or these data centers driven by security establishment even understand what is greater public good? So having said that, I think a lot more work is required. And that's where, we are trying to, if you have seen my presentation, we have tried to address the underwater domain awareness as a more holistic approach. Unless we do that, we are not going anywhere. So, I mean, submarine cable, there's a lot of interest, but do we really understand the nuances is a question that we need to really look at. So I think I'll stop there. So Nishta, I think we'll go to the last speaker because we have overshot the time.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to make a quick comment? Oh, yes, Dr. Majumdar, sir, yeah, please go ahead, sir.
Yes. So first of all, it was a great experience, right from a great introduction of the great oceans down to all the presentations. It was a great learning from me, even at this age. Now, I would like to mention one point here. Of course, everything else has been spoken, so I'm not going to repeat anything. So this is about the marine litter. That's my subject actually. So marine litter as such is actually affecting the oceanic health to a great extent. So we need to concentrate on that as well, and land to ocean via the rivers. So we have to make people aware about that and take up projects so that it really comes up. That is, I think that could be great because, you must be knowing about the GPGP, Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is 3 times the size of Spain. I mean, that is something, beyond comprehension. So we must look at that point. And secondly, although you are doing a lot for bringing out, education of people, I think maybe you could do a little more about capacity building of people like us who would like to know more about this and be actively associated with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Sir. We'll be in touch, sir. I mean, we'll request you to also reach out to us, but my team will also reach out to you and let's discuss what we can do as individuals or as institutions. So thank you so much for your kind comments, and the points raised by you are definitely very, very important. Nishta, back to you.
Now I think we'll move on to the concluding segment, and now I'd request my colleague Catherine J, who is the head of research and publications at the Maritime Research Center, to take over. Catherine will do the closing remark, and I would request Catherine to take over the conduct of the program as well, wherein she can call Praful sir also for the vote of thanks. Over to you, Catherine. Thank you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. It was a very insightful and engaging session. So, it's very hard to go after Shankari ma'am, who already encompassed the key points of the whole session. As in, she took the major points from all the presentations, and she knit it together to show the whole picture. So it'll be my effort here to capture the main points of the different speakers today, and also the key takeaways and the tangible outcomes that can come out of this dialogue. So starting off, so we had Arnab sir. So I'll start with a brief history of why we are celebrating World Ocean Day. So it started in 1987 with the Berlin Report and Rio de Janeiro Summit. So why did it start? Because the condition was the voice, the lacked a voice for the oceans as compared to any other voice. So this has been iterated by all the speakers before me, how ocean needs a stronger voice. And I think MDA and UDA are all efforts in that direction. And in 1992, we had the first Ocean Day being celebrated, where ocean shifted from the sidelines to the center in a way. So this year's theme is sustaining what sustains us, and I think we have done justice to explaining what that particular entails. Sustaining what sustains us, be it resources, be it discussing the threats, be it discussing the geopolitics concerning the governance of these oceans. We have covered all the bases as to discuss how we can sustain the ocean, which is sustaining us. Anup sir brilliantly put forward this point, let's conserve what conserves us. And I think that pretty much speaks the same thing. And he mentioned how we are mistreating the oceans for a very long time. And he put forth the distinction between tangibles and the intangible. This distinction is also not something that everybody understands. Tangible is quantified, non-tangible is not properly quantified. And I think in that direction, what Japan is trying to do, what Ms. Zhu pointed out, the analysis of the word, the analysis of the words in different white papers kind of brings together, helps us understand what these non-tangibles are and how these different agencies and stakeholders are putting in, are they putting any effort to address those issues? But at the same time, I think Shankari ma'am was the one who also pointed out how we have an architecture with a fragmented multipolarity, with minimal synergy in the oceans between the stakeholders. So how do you quantify that? And I think in that direction, Japan is doing phenomenal job to bring that quantification, visualizing those quantification. If you remember, there was a graph which she pointed out with three different circles in the graph with different agencies concentrating on different issues. But all of them, they didn't have any kind of overlap. And that was something which amused me. Why wasn't there any overlap between the fisheries, the environment, and the ocean white paper? So, that is a good visualization, and that connection was amazing. Similarly, Emmanuel sir's presentation, rising from an organization, Sasakawa Peace Foundation, which talks about peaceful world through oceans. That's how the whole Ocean Institute started. So the peaceful aspect of the oceans being stressed by Sasakawa Foundation is really amazing. And It's apt to call ocean the mother of life, because mother is also sometimes visualized as a more peaceful figure in our lives. Um, and there are so many things that we need to cover, but I would like to just sum it up and say how the outcomes that we can take away from this today's discussion is that we have a mutual interest, we have a shared vision of a sustainable ocean governance. Ranging from technological collaboration to regional cooperation. So these accelerator items are digital transformation, of course, the digital society, ocean digital society that Sasakawa Foundation is emphasizing on, and on the other hand, the underwater domain awareness emphasized by Maritime Research Center establishes a strong foundation for how the digital ocean can be established. I was amused. I was also very happy to see the component of undersea in the presentation by Ms. Du, and how that is also trying to be taken into account. And there's a huge difference between surface and the underwater, and I think that's a huge discussion in itself. Um, and the other tangible outcome, the major outcome is the marine spatial planning. And what are the different contributors? And I think Arnab sir pointed out the various components as to why we are actually what components contribute to a very good MSC, the tropical waters, the challenges of the tropical waters, the Indo-Pacific challenges, the sonar degradation, and how a region-specific toolkit is necessary. And because we have a huge exclusive economic zone, and we are not, as Imadul sir said, we need 50 billion, but we are able to only raise 1 billion. So there's a huge investment gap. And to bridge that gap, we have to think smartly as well. And I think modeling and simulation kind of presents a very unique opportunity here, given our technological advances. As Anup sir also pointed out, we were at a stage a decade, 2 decades back when the technological prowess was not at par with the vision we had. But now we are at a stage where the technological gaps can be mended, and also the resource gaps in terms of human resources can also be mended, because as you know, South Asia, Asia, a huge population, huge demographic bulge. So this all these different opportunities can be put together, and India and Japan can be a huge can pave a great partnership by utilizing these opportunities. So I would just conclude this amazing webinar today, and congratulate all the speakers for participating and sharing their immense experience and immense insights on this wondrous occasion of World Ocean Science Day. World Ocean Day. I will ask Praful sir to give the vote of thanks now. Thank you so much.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. It's my pleasant privilege to propose the vote of thanks today. It's been a very enriching, engaging day, and I'm so happy that we are able to explore possibilities for collaboration with the Sasakawa Foundation. It's an honor to do that, and we'd be very happy to take this forward. I really like now in India we've always believed that water is life, and but today I learned that ocean is the mother of life. I mean, it's a very profound thought, and I'm really deeply impressed. I mean, it set me thinking in so many ways. See, water has always been a global common, and 75% of the earth is water, but unfortunately we don't give it the importance it deserves. It's a neglected common, and that's why we go through. I mean, this phrase of the tragedy of the commons. Water is life. The ocean is the mother of life. I mean, that is really amazing. And what Professor Shankari Subramaniam Sundaraman mentioned, that India has this box office seat in the Indian Ocean Theatre. And hence, I think it's imperative that the Indian India thinks out of the box. We need to think out of the box because India, unfortunately, I mean, it's a very ancient civilization and a very young nation. We've had a lot of highs and lows, a great legacy, maritime legacy, but we've forgotten most of it. So we need to revive it and connect into our past to achieve our full potential going forward. So that is imperative. And the Indian, recently we interacted with the Joint Secretary and Ministry of External Affairs and the Indian Ocean Rim Association. India is taking over the chair in November. So India has got a good opportunity and MRC has been approached by the MEA to take this concept of UDA to the Indian Ocean Rim Association countries. And I would urge the Sasakawa Foundation to collaborate with us on this, for this as well. Plus, next year will be the 10th anniversary of the ASEAN. And there is a lot of opportunity there, a lot of scholarships being offered there by the Government of India, CII, and so many others. So what no, like I just want to mention here, there's huge synergy, I mean, between Japan and India, I mean, which the Sasakawa Foundation and the Maritime Research Center can exploit. No, year before last, we got 500 applications for summer internship from the 4 IITs. Last year, there were 800 applications from the 4 IITs, Bombay, Delhi, Kharagpur, and Madras. This year, Kanpur joined, and the 5 IITs, we've got 2,000 summer applications for internship this summer, which is very, very encouraging. I doubt any big corporate house in India has been able to garner such attention. And this is because of the yeoman work Commander Das has been doing and MRC has been doing in the field of the in this domain of in the underwater for the awareness of the underwater domain. So I see a very, very bright future when the smartest, brightest kids in this country are approaching us just by a web presence and without any advertisements. So that's, I mean, a huge vote of confidence in the in this domain and the attention it deserves. So with that, I'd like to thank Ambassador Mudgal for his opening remarks, Professor Shankari Sundaraman for her very comprehensive talk on today's topic, and Dr. Imadul Islam for reaching out and making this happen today. And of course, Dr. Zhu Mengyao. I hope I am pronouncing it right. Please pardon me if I have not pronounced it rightly. So thank you very much, the team at MRC and everyone. Wish you a very, very good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Just want to mention to Professor Sankari ma'am that we also got multiple applications in liberal arts from St. Stephen's College also. So more than 55 applications, and a few of them will be joining us in another week.
Okay.
So
very glad to hear that.
Forward to working with you.
Definitely.
Ma'am, very quick last comment, and then I'll come to Dr. Islam for his closing remarks. Ma'am, if you would like to say something.
No, I would just, I think there was one question in the chat box, if I'm right, by Gaurav Datta. And if I'm right, Gaurav Datta is my own student who did his PhD with me. The name is too familiar to be any different Gaurav. I want to pull his leg by saying that it isn't enough that he asked me questions while in class, he's still asking me questions. So I'm very happy. I'm happy. Gaurav, you've raised this context of the event of a Taiwan contingency. As you know, there has been this continued reference to Taiwan and how the limits that Xi Jinping has spoke about in terms of the time limit of 2027 is actually approaching. To my mind, I am not yet seeing any signs of a direct Taiwan invasion, which I think will have, as has been said earlier in the, even if you saw the Defense Secretary's statement, Pete Hegseth's statement recently, Taiwan will remain protected. The ASEAN states you have raised on how do these view it and what is the capacity building that is going on. As you know, ASEAN does not recognize Taiwan as an as a separate state in terms of a two-China policy, but recognizes one China policy, but has business relations and trade relations with Taiwan. So in that sense, I think the ASEAN grouping is definitely more cautious with the Trump administration, because I think you need to see this balance very clearly, that what you've seen is, and let me add, the very fact that the Shangri-La dialogue had a bipartisan group that came as a panel to the dialogue, because there was also Senator Tammy Duckworth who was there, who was a Democrat from the senator of the Democrat Party from Illinois. And there is a nuanced difference how you viewed Pete Hegseth's comments and her comments on individual issues. And I think you have to understand the bipartisanship in terms of approach to Indo-Pacific will continue, because in the larger context, China will be seen as an issue. And this is where I think there is a distinction, Gaurav, is that there was more an emphasis on economic matters under the Biden administration, and you're going to see a reversion to the security related debates in the Trump administration. So for the ASEAN states, it is going to be a period of caution. They cannot, and I written about this just 2 days ago in the Indian Express, that the ASEAN can no longer be comfortable with this whole thing of China being the economic partner and the United States being its security partner, because somewhere or the other you're going to get pushed against a wall as far as this is concerned. I hope that answers your question. I want to thank everyone for asking me to be part of this, and my sincere thanks to you all, and look forward to a more integrated kind of work with all of you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Dr. Islam, your kind comments, please.
Yes, thank you so much. It's such a very productive and thoughtful discussions. Actually, also enlightened me very well. Yes, I must say thank you to all, particularly Dr. Commander Dash, that yes, it's just beginning. We'll talk to find out the room, how can we work together in future. And again, on behalf of our Ocean Policy Research Institute, the Sasakawa Peace Foundations, we must say thank you. And hopefully we'll work together in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.